Welcome in to Offensively Accurate, another episode hosted by yours truly, Atlas Thugged, aka White Boy D Voice. And we have a loaded news today, right? So we're going to uncover stuff from the Biden administration withholding information about the assassination attempt. We're going to be covering Elon and Trump. Obviously, it's been the hugest news. We already have a chat in here saying, given all the craziness in the UK, I'm shocked that they want to tell Elon he's inciting dangerous rhetoric. Yes, we're definitely going to be talking about that as well. Tweets in store too. Thank you for everybody who is here. We're going to be talking, Great World War II. We have California opposing a ridiculous bill, or not opposing a ridiculous bill. Their opposition is ridiculous to what the bill is implying. As well as we have the UK riots reaching new levels. You have Keir Starmer getting kicked out of a pub even. The pub owner actually pushed him out. I do have a couple announcements though before we get into all of this. One of the first things being, unfortunately, my monetization was temporarily revoked on YouTube. I'm still in the YouTube partner program. I had to actually turn back on all of super chats, super thanks, everything of the like as well. So with that being said, if you were here from the last episode, I was planning on giving gift memberships out because I have free ones to give away because, it's a fresh channel, freshly monetized. And I don't have access to any of that. I have to actually wait for Google to send me a PIN number in the mail and then confirm the address through those means. So until then, I probably won't be able to do anything with memberships. So I am so sorry. But to Sandor, Kev Doge, Mr. Cigarello, Kukla, and I think there's one more. I did write all your guys' names down. So you guys will be first in line to get those memberships as soon as I have a chance to be able to do that. So hopefully it'll be soon. It shouldn't take too long to get the mail. Man, the reactions we got, and what's insane, I think, let's start right into it, with Elon Musk and Donald Trump, 1 billion people within a 3-hour span. I don't know if you were able to see on the thumbnail itself, actually, but there was a tweet from the leading report saying between the hours of 7:47 p.m. and 10:47 p.m., over 998 million different individuals tuned in during that period to listen to the discussion that happened between those two individuals. And it just goes to show how people are dying to hear from this man in different forms, different lights. Obviously, that'll do way bigger numbers than any sort of CNN interview, any sort of oppositional hard interview that's done by the likes of a Caitlin Collins. And it was just very, very, very refreshing, although it was extremely boring at parts. Forgive me. It seemed that there for a bit, he didn't want to talk about immigration. I was following along with Nick Fuentes' stream a bit, but then he eventually came back in and he said, Elon, I think the number's a lot higher than what we're seeing. I think it's over the 20 million. And I've over in here been like, I think it's like 40. It might even be 50 million, to be honest. So a lot of good to come from the interview as well. We do have some different opposing reactions. We do have some different reactions from even those on the right who seem to not enjoy what was going on, although they're a little bit far in the dissonant aspect. Not my camp, truly. And then you have some ridiculous, oh, woe is me, kind of very dramatic reactions from the left, and we're going to get into that. But first, we have headlines of the day, so we'll go into the Elon stuff here at this, probably in the second hour. We're going to start with some of the headlines. We're going to just rip through them as fast as I can because there was so much that happened today. It was kind of hard to actually kind of articulate them into different kind of subjects. So we're just going to bang them out one by one as we go through. Some of these you might have already heard, though. But just to give a point to what I'm saying about these ridiculous dramatic reactions, we'll go here, actually. Let me put this on screen. I'm going to switch over here. Let me find my button here. Okay. So if you want to take a look at this tweet has been quoted and has almost 500,000 views. It was quoted by somebody a lot bigger than me, obviously. But he says, how many innocent people will die because Elon Musk brought Donald Trump back onto Twitter? And the comments didn't do me no wrong, right? For doing an interview, wow, you people are dramatic, whining, people dying, massive drama queen. There's some gifs of, the drama in here. But I think, if anything, I think this shows the mental rot that exists on even the shallow ends, even with normies as well. Obviously not most normal people don't feel this way, but just this kind of extremely precautionary, this internet digital discourse is going to lead to literal innocent people being killed. It's insane. But again, they're inside of these absurdly insulated echo chambers where, every time Donald Trump speaks, flowers just die in a garden nearby. It's just this kind of insane delusional reality they live in. And this even extends to the woe is me kind of we're living in the Handmaid's Tale rhetoric that comes along when you're talking about the Roe versus Wade and what happened with abortion. All of the extremely dramatic overreactions that happen from that. I see this to be in the same light, but I would imagine, honestly, this is a lot worse. This is literally just two men talking. And and innocent people are going to die from it. I kind of even struggle to even kind of work back. If I'm trying to work backwards and think through this person's logic, it's I'm trying to understand an insane man's thoughts. It's just impossible. These things just don't make any sense. There's no path of logic to connect these things outside of the fact that it's nonstop reinforced through the institutions as well as mainstream media that everything and all about the intent of these two men is quite literally to the detriment of society. So when you barely follow things or you have, less than the 70 IQ, you fall into these traps and then you make these ridiculously cucked and effeminate posts on Twitter for me and everyone else to make fun of you for. Now, hopefully that this person turns to Christ and stops living this ridiculous way. But the rainbow and the wizard and his username doesn't give me much hope, but we can always hope that people will change. So just to give you an idea of just the level of absurdity of the reactions. Now, this one was a little bit more of fair play, seeing how it was just like it wasn't a direct, like imminent kind of, and now they're going to do this, and now they're going to do this. It was just more of a basic like, oh no, the woe is me, people are dead. So now we're going to get into a bit more of the darker stuff. So starting off, we have not only that Kamala was copying Trump over the tax, no tax on tips, the Biden administration decided they would follow suit as well. So I have this, and I believe it was Karine Jean-Pierre who said this. Now I'll put the tweet on screen as well. This is from Leading Report too. It says Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre announces that Joe Biden is now in support of eliminating taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers. And it's like, yeah, I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are. What's funny is you can see this top comment right here from Gunther Egan when Barack told him to imagine that. And if you've been following along with me or anyone else, you've probably been seeing some of the news that's been floating around, seeing that Obama was the one allegedly threatening to indict the 25th Amendment, essentially, as Trump said on Spaces. What they did when they came to Biden was, you want us to do this the easy way or the hard way. And now it's kind of sad to see even this paper-handed Biden administration that only has a couple months to even serve out is also trying to still continually, I guess, garner public respect. And for what reason, I don't truly kind of understand. But again, I think it's pretty overtly obvious that both, not even just the Kamala campaign for the future administration, but the current one simply adopted what Trump was saying because it was popular. And again, they cannot be organic of themselves because clearly their singular purpose is to destroy and rot out this country from the inside. So they take from the good and the good ideas. So they scalp from Trump, and this is what you get. This is the result of that. Now, but as a reminder, though, Drew Hernandez, making sure we do not forget this. Drew Hernandez says you can't make this stuff up. Kamala Harris not only steals Trump's no tax on tips campaign promise like a typical DEI hire, but she is also one of the top contributors as to why your tips are so heavily taxed in the first place. And to make more sense of what he means by that, Kamala Harris literally was the tiebreaker for one of these specific votes in Congress that occurred. And, if you're sitting as the VP, you do become the tiebreaker Senate vote. That is one of the purposes of the chair of the vice president. Now we're going to go ahead and take a quick listen to this video here. Let me make sure I grab my headphones. I might have to do it here in a second, but we'll go ahead and take a listen to this video. If I can get it to play. Here we go.
The yeas are 50, the nays are 50. The Senate being equally divided, the Vice President votes in the affirmative, and the bill, as amended, is passed.
Because when I get to office, office, we are going to not charge taxes on tips, people making tips.
Eliminate taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers.
No, I think if you weren't catching these headlines, it was clearly obviously just working its way up to the current timeline, showing that the slow change, in fact, probably just the actually 180 flip on that, obviously, as these headlines go and go and go and go and go, as she's part of the administration that's been ensuring that your taxes are taken in the most egregious of ways. And I think most people can remember that specific headline coming out regarding the fact that 87,000 IRS agents were hired. Um, One of those things where I think most people just see that and they go like, that seems kind of insane. That seems like kind of a lot. And then I think what most people didn't see, I think the byline that came with that headline that was even more egregious was the way they laid out that every single one of these 87,000 IRS agents is going to be equipped with a 9mm and then trained on how to use it. I think almost kind of just like putting out this kind of fear mongering. So you better pay your taxes, right? Not sure why you would go to those lengths, honestly, to threaten it out. But the music is phenomenal. I love that music behind it. That I can't remember what that song that is. People are going to flame me for not remembering what that song is from. But it's phenomenal. And I think that we're getting back, that post itself gave me some of those vibes of the 2016 kind of meme energy. And it's kind of funny to see that on the eve of, or I guess the next day in the morning after the Trump Elon debate, which I think put a lot of things back into the news. I say debate, but it was more of a discussion. It was only a discussion, really. They didn't debate much. And with it, we're getting at least some rejuvenation. I think one of the top things, I think Andrew Torba even pointed to this too, the very first topic of discussion did go to the assassination attempt. And I think that's something that's kind of like fallen out of the news cycle a bit. We'll get into a bit more of the specifics of that, but I did think it was a good move on Elon's part to just lead with that as well. I think because the people are still waiting, right? We're still kind of waiting for more of an official story. Now, I do think that when we got the body cam footage of the police officer, who I think was climbing on the back of another, this was the incident where he actually got the gun pointed at him by Thomas Crooks because he climbed up the roof himself. I thought it was with the ladder, but apparently he just climbed on the back of one of his fellow officers. And you can see it pretty well in the body cam footage, although the audio is muted for the first minute and a half. The officer sees what's going on in a split second, but he can't reach his gun just based on the way that he's kind of positioned climbing up onto the roof. And then in the attempt to try to reach for that gun, he falls back down, which Trump actually said during the interview that this individual hurt his ankle pretty badly. So I guess, shout out to him. At least he disrupted it in some form. And I think that's what led to the rushed, as I guess I should say, obviously with him missing and then the bullets kind of flying everywhere around. But we'll get into more of the specifics regarding the Secret Service because people on even the libertarian circles as well, not even the most right wing, are kind of displeased with the fact that he's not willing, I should say, to lean into the conspiracy kind of aspect, the narrative. I think there could be two things there. One could be like maybe he doesn't want to because he doesn't want to risk them trying to do it again. Maybe it's one of the situations where you don't know who to trust. And with that too, people point, we can get private security as well. That's one thing, but when you're trying to apply the same level of credentials that Secret Service has to like a PMC organization like Blackwater, I don't think those things would match up, let alone I don't think the optics of Trump hiring his own private military is something that he could play down very well against the left. They'd be like, look, it's a coup, it's military. They would do crazy stuff with that, obviously. Now, regarding the assassination attempt, I don't know how many people saw this. It kind of fell under the radar as well. Let me switch back over here. This is the attempted Trump assassin Thomas Crooks trained at the same gun range that was used by the Department of Homeland Security. Now, this is also confirmed by Leading Report as well, but they have a slight bit more information. I think this is very, very kind of absurd and obviously eye-raising. And this goes along with the 18,000 other mistakes and weirdness that is involved with simply the assassination attempt. Now, if you see this, it says that he spent months engaging in rifle training at the same training facility. So it wasn't like a one-time thing. It's actually like a documented, he did it for quite a while. And then it was used by not only the DHS, but multiple local and federal law enforcement agencies. Oh, forgive me, someone called me. So according to newly released records, we do have confirmation though that he was once again well within the purview of multiple federal agencies. You know, they do the same thing with Bart Simpson, you know, say the line like he was on our radar, you know, they do this very typical like this is the FBI MO that you see all this stuff all the time. I don't know who's calling me. They need to stop. Um the Trump campaign office, literally almost hours, we're moving away, sorry. We're moving away from that. The Trump campaign office in Ashburn, Virginia, just shortly before the spaces even started, was broken into. So I'll go here again from leading report as well. It was broken into, right, for confirmation, 2.5 million views. Now, Lips of TikTok actually digged a little bit further on this, and you'll put it on screen here for you. This is the man who apparently did it. The police are searching for him. I've not seen an update since then about this, obviously, because most other news is being overflooded with just the reactions of the Elon and Trump interview. But this is the man, so I guess if anyone on stream right now has seen this guy, make sure you call your local authorities at, you know, or whatever this number is, 571 or whatever. It's curious what he may have stolen. And I think also going under the radar is the fact that there was a report that the Trump campaign was hacked by Iran. If anyone was following me when I was on Jar Openers number 2, the second episode with Worrell over on his channel, and it was on mine too, we had one of the commenters kind of bringing that up to us, and I was unaware that Iran had actually been behind the campaign hack. And I think one of the top items that was taken from that was apparently a pre-vetting of J.D. Vance, a dossier, as you, if you will. And I guess what that would be essentially is all of the campaign administration staffers who Trump would assign to specific VP picks essentially tells these guys, like, I need you to dig up as much dirt as you can, things that could possibly bite us, images, you know, past bad relationships, all of these kinds of things, and put all of it in here so we have him vetted as much as we can so we can be prepared for if any negative blowback were to occur regarding this pick. And so apparently that is what has been identified to be the target of the hack. Now, I doubt that this man and that thing are related, but it possibly could be. It seems to be not only if you're getting an international hack on the campaign, but that's shortly followed by a individual physically breaking into a campaign office. It seems to be that maybe there's possibly some bit of information out there that's extremely damning, or it could be nothing. But something to keep your eye on too, because it seems to be that both of those headlines are kind of falling under the radar. And it's just a side point, truly. We'll go to the next one here, though, which is we're going to watch a little video. And I don't understand why Kamala takes these stances, because I think if you were to ask even the average person on the left, say we're going to talk not the progressives, not the colored haired weirdos, but say we're talking to your average kind of like black person in the black community, they also would oppose the mass illegal immigration that we're seeing. Not only do I think that in my heart of hearts, we have proof of this is the way that New York was reacting when they were dumping in migrants off of buses for hotels. There's a couple of days where there was like stand down orders being given to the actual civilians there in different areas of New York because they were getting angry and visibly upset with what was going on. And they were saying like, hey, you're doing this with our money. Stop doing this. So I guess my point being is I don't understand why even Kamala refuses to back away from her positions on the immigration by saying, well, come on, come, instead of taking a more harsher position. Like, honestly, like, why doesn't she just copy everything that Trump has and then just win and ride in on the black woman identity politics? So we'll go to this video, though, here, because it's the complete opposite of what I think that she should be doing, but I doubt she'll ever take my advice. This is insane. Again, from Drew Hernandez as well, really good reporter. Kamala Harris reveals she will be freeing all illegal aliens from detention centers in the United States if she becomes president. So we'll take a listen to this, about 30 seconds long.
Question over here. Hi, my name is Sally Hartman. I'm a volunteer with the Center for Worker Justice. I want to know, when you become president, would you be committing to close immigration detention centers?
Absolutely, on day one. On day one. And thank you for
On day one, she will free the people out of the detention centers. So where else where they go? Well, quite literally, nowhere. They would simply probably just flood the streets. Once again, they'd find their closest allocation center where they can get their benefits and sign up for a temporary social security, and then begin their process of slowly draining this country of its resources and the people who actually are willing to work and not break the law. I think one of the most insane things I'm actually seeing about a lot of this illegal immigration is quite a large portion of them actually are literally unemployed and are not holding down current positions, therefore providing zero value to the country at all. Even if it, you take my opinion about their culturally shared values out of it, we just look at an efficiency metric. And there's one photo that went viral about this. I actually don't have it currently on me, but it made me think of this. And it is a park at around, I think it's like 12:25 p.m. It's like a New York park, I believe. And it is literally flooded with Indian migrants. I don't know if it was just purely Indian, but they were a bunch of brown individuals. And the quote was, "This doesn't make any sense. It's like 12 o'clock at this time. Like, why aren't any of them working?" Now, maybe it was a mass event, but the person who took the picture said this is a daily occurrence. This park has essentially been taken over. Now, I don't necessarily walk around the city that I live in and see many enclaves that aren't working. However, I do know that there are enclaves even in the city that I live in. And me being so far north away from the actual Mexican border has been one of the reasons why so early on in this, I've been saying, like, dude, the number is much higher than 20 million even. And we even got a leaked report from a representative in Congress about a year ago. And he said that he believed the number was, or he had seen reports that spoke to the estimate being close to 40 million people. And that was a year ago. So I'm keen to believe that these numbers are much, much higher. And I think if the average American person knew what the number actually was, you'd become a lot more radical probably in a few minutes. Especially because the effects in the draining and the detriment to not only society as a whole, economically, efficiently, but the breaking of a homogenous kind of shared culture. I think all of us can sit here and be like, we can see what the damage is happening. Racial division being blown like crazy. I mean, people like literally cannot get along. And not only that, I think it extends to simple things like education as well. And it breaks apart into a bunch of different kind of divisive ways that all essentially are work to everyone's disfavor. And they move things in a poor direction. It's definitely all generally abiding by secular kind of progressive values. And that's just really where we don't want to go as a country. We kind of need to pull back and aim our hearts and minds at God and Christianity and move towards those things. And I get called a radical individual for saying such. So to move on from this, though, we have a couple more smaller individual pieces before we're going to start breaking into bigger news here. One thing that was positive about J.D. Vance, although I'm not too keen on him as a VP pick myself, and I'll take it to the screen here as well. This is from the leading report as well. Republican vice presidential nominee Senator J.D. Vance says he wants to boost the child tax credit to $5,000 per child from its current $2,000 in an attempt to incentivize Americans to have more children. I think is a phenomenal thing. I would imagine that, especially given the crisis that we currently see with the housing market and things of such, you are definitely going to get a positive reaction from the Republican base for this. The only way I can really see it being opposed by the left is by the obvious metric, which is, this is very discriminatory against people who can't have kids. What about the moms who can't have children? And it's like, okay, we'll once again go back and we'll move and we'll make sure that we can make the standard bend to the exception rather than the standard bend to the norm. And it, I can see that being a common angle for attack, but I think most people would appreciate that. Again, once again, speaking to the normals that kind of exist in the left wing, the more the apathetic, the people who aren't truly kind of in politics in and out, reading the news, but those who get essentially their informed opinions by watching, ESPN and getting it through the institutionalized means in which they constantly kind of repeat parroting points from mainstream media. You'll see it from Hollywood as well, because Hollywood does these things to reinforce these ideas over and over and over again through different means. Those people, I would imagine, could see this and be like, oh, I think that's pretty nice, because they still have the value of at least wanting to have kids and raise families. Not all, not an absolute, but there are definitely those that do exist on the left that would feel that way. Now, one thing I did find curious too, because we're seeing a lot of issues regarding both vice presidential picks, not only just with JD Vance, and I'm not sure if people are aware of the approval ratings of JD Vance. I think JD Vance is actually breaking Kamala Harris's metrics of disfavorability. I think he's sitting at the lowest that any vice presidential pick ever has, since 1952. I think his name was Thomas Eagleton. He's sitting at like a negative 11 or negative 21. I can't remember. Massive difference between the two, but I think it's negative 11, which isn't good by any means. So I think not only just is there an idea for JD Vance to be replaced, but Ron DeSantis is actually thinking the same exact thing for Tim Walz. So I'll take you here. And again, crazy, because almost every single one of these is from Leading Report. I promise they're not all from Leading Report. But Governor Ron DeSantis says that Walz's days are numbered as Kamala's VP pick. A lot of me kind of takes that as bluffing. And I'll tell you why. Tim Walz's numbers are actually doing very well. He's actually polling very, very similarly to what Kamala is. Now, JD Vance, on the other hand, is not polling at all very well, period. And there's also a decent portion of the base who would have liked to not only have seen a different pick, but are still right now chiding him over and over again. Largely that comes from the dissident right with the Groypers, who have issues with his stances regarding things like white replacement and the such. So I think, if anything, if I was about my money at all, I would imagine that JD Vance would get replaced before Tim Walz. But I also don't think that Donald Trump would back off of somebody that he put his name on. So it's kind of hard to tell, especially because a lot of what drives Trump is the ego aspect. Not saying he's like a super huge narcissist, but just saying, like, you don't have to doubt that Trump's going to act in his own best interest. So we do have another kind of weirder story that's kind of irrelevant to the mainstream macro aspect of news. We've got Sandra Clegane in here saying JD needs to act like a Catholic and pull out. There's a lot of things with JD Vance that I truly find not good. I really wish it would have been Vivek. I know I'm coming from a perspective of somebody who wishes that the white replacement issue would be a lot more on the headlines. But even as I think an Indian man, I think a Vivek Ramaswamy would do more for this country than a JD Vance. And it's also kind of weird that JD and Vivek knew each other in college, and then JD chose to name his son Vivek after Vivek. It was just like this. There's just so much weird kind of stuff around JD. Now, obviously, the couch story is completely fabricated, as far as what I've come to understand. And if it's not, I mean, wow, that's just kind of insane. He's definitely not the man that I would want shoulder to shoulder with in a battle. And he's definitely not somebody who I want leading or help lead the country. And namely, specifically, because he used to be a never Trumper who said Donald Trump was Hitler. And then in 2 years was like, wow, dude, he's a really good president. Now he's the second in command. And I bring this up because the comparison to Mike Pence has to be brought up. They call him Judas Pence for a reason. He was the second in command, but he stabbed him in the back by refusing to put forward the alternate slate of electors. And instead, once again, we get a never Trumper filling that slot in which Donald Trump was stung from previously. So I guess the main idea there is also, like, it doesn't seem like he's not making the same mistakes that he was in his first term. So again, it's a lot of hoping and praying. But again, this is why Groper War 2 has even started. It's why it's a thing. It's because people are tired of seeing these very, very lackluster speeches, very lackluster responses, and very lackluster campaign management from the top all the way to the bottom. He says, what if Vivek was the couch? There's a possibility. Vivek, don't come off to me as the straightest tool in the shed. So to move on, though, again, from Leading Report, we'll go here. Oh, forgive me. I forgot this last portion. So all I wanted to put on screen here was this crazy story. Illinois school worker was sentenced to 9 years for stealing $1.5 million in chicken wings. And you ready? You don't even have to guess. Guess what color they were. All right. Okay, right? That explains the story. No, I'm just kidding. Not just kidding. but she stole 11,000 cases of chicken wings worth 1.5 million during the COVID pandemic. And so I read a little bit about this. So she essentially was filling it out for the school. And when she would fill it out for the school, she would essentially just sign off on it, but then have it delivered to her house. And it wasn't until, it literally, I kid you not, it wasn't until another staffer saw that the inventory sheet had bone-in wings that she was like, oh, this is odd. Because the school cafeteria didn't serve bone-in wings, they only served boneless. So she was beaten by the fact that she had to make sure she was getting bone-in wings. She couldn't even keep it to items that the school was actually ordering. And I think if anything, with that story in particular, it shows how DOE funds are just kind of like, they can get abused very easily if you put somebody who's in a position who's going to just not be responsible. And the tweet kind of said, imagine one of these people existing in every single one of the 50 states. Now imagine what kind of like strain and pull that does if you then keep adding on to those numbers. Like how many people are in these positions where they have power over school income, and then they abuse it and they turn it into something that it shouldn't be, and then they end up wasting money, and then it falls out of the school ecosystem, and then we're still sitting here scratching our heads like didn't the school get $14 million in all of this? Why are their return on investment is so poor? It's so bad. Again, DOE just needs to get outright abolished, period. Now I will go to one of these other issues here, which is Joe Biden confirms he was pushed out of the race by top Democrats who apparently staged a coup on him. He doesn't say all of these things specifically, but he does say the quiet part a little bit out loud, and we'll go here. And this is from Colin Rugg on Twitter. Let me switch screens here.
Look, the polls we had showed that it was a neck-and-neck race. Would have been down to the wire. But what happened was a number of my Democratic colleagues in the House and Senate thought that I was going to hurt them in the races. And I was concerned if I stayed in the race, that would be the topic. You'd be interviewing me about why did Nancy Pelosi say, why did so, and I thought it'd be a real distraction. Look,
so he essentially finally comes forward saying that no, he was pushed upon by top Democrats. Now, Colin Ruggs goes into a bit more detail, but he says a number of his colleagues in the House and Senate thought I was going to hurt them in the races. And obviously, he was going to after the debate performance. But again, the debate performance, they let him do, knowing he was going to probably perform as badly as he did. So really, it wasn't that they actually feel this way. It was that they had to wait for a moment so pivotal, such as that when they actually finally did stage the coup, it would seem as natural as feasibly possible. But just to kind of shore up confirmation there. We have a good bit more regarding the Biden administration and what's been going on in those departments. The former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy even went to great lengths to explain that he believes that the Obama administration has still been running things, and in fact the entire presidency of Joe Biden has been at the behest of the Obama administration. Now, I'm not sure if that just means Obama in particular, or if that also includes, whatever dark web, shadow web of individuals who would have filled out his bureaucracy and his camp. Because everyone knows a lot of this really started breaking down from the Bush administration to Obama, so on and so forth, and then you end up here, right? I think, think about things like the BP oil spill. That seems like it was so long ago, but so many bad moments, huge disasters have led us up to, the breaking down of what we are currently. Now, there were a few other stories that I would want to go to. One of these is more actually kind of damaging in regards to the actual assassination attempt, and I'm sure many people probably haven't seen this. It's very, very new. And once again, let me get rid of some of these tabs here before my computer goes up in flames. Let's switch it to the main screen here. Leading report one more time. Biden admin is withholding information in response to a FOIA request about the FBI's coordination with the Secret Service during the July 13th Butler, PA Trump rally, according to Judicial Watch. Now, forgive me. I'm not sure who actually initiated the FOIA request. If it wasn't by, a Congress committee or someone along those lines. Oh, what is up, Cook? I haven't seen you in here in a minute. Um, I'm curious if this is going to be one of these, depending on who filed the FOIA request. I'm curious if this can lead into holding in contempt of Congress or holding in contempt of court. But again, I'm unsure who actually filed the FOIA request. But I think that's pretty damning alone to outright be withholding information about what the FBI was doing with the Secret Service. And I think some of these things that speak to that also is the fact that, the A team of Secret Service was not with Donald Trump, and he got some kind of weird mix of like, third stringers and desk workers. And as far as I understand and believe, some of that coordination was due to the fact that Jill Biden also received some kind of security protective detail that was coordinated based on the trips that she was doing. And if I remember correctly, they gave Joe Biden like the primary group, which I think, kind of makes sense given she's the first lady and then Trump is the former president. But again, I don't really know. If you were asking me, I'd probably still give the best protection detail I could to the former president, Donald Trump. If he was like a newcomer nominee like RFK, then I could see that you would give RFK kind of like the third string team. Even with his history, I think you should get better than the third string team, but I could see and understand why they would make those choices. Once again, I think it speaks to the fact that there was a definite conspiracy that happened in Pennsylvania, Butler specifically, to ensure that Donald Trump was assassinated, or they got as close as they possibly could to doing so. And I think, a number of things speak to that. What I led in with earlier, which is we still don't have an official story. It's been weeks at this point now. I think I can't remember what his name is, the acting Secret Service director who took the place of Cheadle also had very, very poor answers. He seemed super flustered. He was getting angry all the time with people. Josh Hawley grilled the absolute crap out of him. Ted Cruz grilled the absolute crap out of him. And most of his answers were, I don't know. I don't know. And then it leads me back once again to say, it's very disappointing that Donald Trump also is not leaning into this by saying like, man, like, I don't know if I should be able to trust these guys around me. Like even like small things like that, but he keeps going like, and they protected me that day. And it's like, they barely did, like this woman were barely covering you. If they would have gone for a headshot, the woman wouldn't have even been at your shoulders. But I think it's a tough thing for him, especially at his age, working that in his mind, thinking like, can I really disrespect the people who literally covered me with their bodies if I don't know for 100% that they were in on these things? And so it's a very difficult situation, I think, for him to go in. But I think if he was in his 2016 form, he would be making these comments going like, hey, like, what's going on? This seems like retarded that there were so many different mistakes made nonstop. And Occam's razor suggests that these weren't mistakes, that it was intentional. Sandor says, I think you're being a bit harsh. It's very, very difficult to holster for a woman, maybe. For a chubby, overweight woman, maybe. Not to be, personally offensive to that individual. But again, if you were asking me, I think I could honestly go walk into the nearby Walmart, and if you gave me 40 minutes, I could find at least 2 more people who I'd put on the Secret Service before I'd let that woman serve one more day. But again, I think that lady in particular was one of the pencil pushers. At least I thought that. But it turns out she's still on the security detail. She was spotted with JD Vance on his team. But on JD Vance's team, people are pointing out like, we need to be careful with JD Vance, like what's going on here. But again, it's not to be mean just because she's a woman. It's to be mean because like if we're wanting to protect the most valuable asset in this country as a human life, which is this president, I find it offensive that you would give me that woman. Like I would rather I'd go into a prison cell and grab someone out of there before I would continue to do that. Some people think that's harsh, but that's just the reality of biology. So Sandor says that's not fair. You can say the R word. If I type it, my message gets deleted. If you put the asterisk somewhere in between the word, it won't recognize it. It has like less. The ATS doesn't pick up the asterisks. I have to tell my chat that all the time. I see the chat rate moving, but then I don't see the messages come in, and I'm like, oh, I know, I know that one is probably a good one, and I missed it. I appreciate it though. Looks like you just tried again and it didn't work. I apologize, man. YouTube has me pretty clamped down on making sure I follow the rules. I can say whatever with the sound. They have less ability to kind of mess with that though. We do have the California bill that I think is going to disgust a lot of people that we can get into. And, you know, we're kind of getting closer into the bigger subject items here, too. We'll go ahead and move into the California Finance Department. And again, for everybody who is watching, we are going to cover the Elon Musk stuff. I just want to knock some of this out before I get to the second hour. Looks like I only got 15 minutes left. I promise you at the 1 hour mark, we'll move over to the Elon Musk stuff and I'll cut the other stuff out. But I think a lot of this stuff's important and I don't want all of it to kind of get drowned out just simply because Elon and Trump talked to each other. I think it's a great thing that happened. I just want to say I think some of this stuff is very, very important. And starting off with this list, or continuing with this, I should say, is that the California Finance Department is opposing a bill in California because it would make buying children for sex a felony. And the reason why is because they say the potential cost that the state would have to deal with would just be too much. That was the most way I could say it without just like being irritated reading it, you know. And this is Libs of TikTok saying California won't protect children from sex trafficking because it's too expensive. Yes, you heard that right. All right, we have a clip to go with it, and she'll probably explain things to a bit better than I can, although I doubt it. My voice is always better than what a woman can do. Just messing. I'm not trying to be mean. But if anything's wrong with the sound, let me know, up or down. I will change it accordingly.
This proposal to ramp up the penalties for child sex buyers is known as SB 1414, and it is still working its way through the state's lawmaking process, but not without some debate. So today, the Assembly's powerful Appropriations Committee held a brief hearing on the bill before placing the proposal on what's known as the suspense file. This is basically a list of bills that are expected to cost the state a significant amount of money. And next week, lawmakers will decide if the bills on that list pass or die without public discussion. But in today's discussion, Governor Newsom's Department of Finance said right off the bat the intentions of this bill are good, but strictly for money reasons, it's against SB 1414 because it will cost the state a lot and increase California's prison population. The governor himself, though, has said he supports this bill. The author of the proposal, State Senator Shannon Grove, said people who buy children for sex need to be behind bars.
That was an absurd argument. To say that it's going to cost tens of thousands of dollars to lock these individuals up that buy children for sex, and it would roll back their prison exodus that they've been letting people out of prison is ridiculous. If you look at traumatized youth that have been bought and sold for sex, it costs the state upwards of $300,000 just for basic services. If you take a 13-year-old that you'd have to take care of till they're 18. And then not even that, but the trauma that that person as an adult would experience all their life. Lower income jobs, those kinds of things that traumatically affect these kids. It's ridiculous.
I mean, dude, ridiculous is an understatement. You're telling me we have to pay to do work? We have to pay? Like, come on, man. What even kind of argument is that, though? But then I think, once again, it just shows the huge lack of morality. There, like, the morality that exists at the average level, even in the California Finance Department, it's non-existent, dude. And if anything, they're probably more concerned about themselves, like, you know, if they do implement all of these changes that are going to cost them a lot, well, then that reflects poorly on them because then now their budgeting is going to be all messed up. And that's just too much work. Can't we just let these people buy kids for sex trafficking? Like, and it's just like, bro, what? Like, again, it's laughably stupid, but it's not even stupid. It's just evil. I mean, we're getting to points where it's like, you cannot make this stuff up anymore. Like, you get like, I mean, it's starting even from like the stupid stuff you see in the Minnesota Pride Parade where an actual kid participated, and I could be wrong. I might not be the Minnesota one. It might be the one that happened in San Fran. But either way, it's just like, like it's not coming back without actually like radical action. And this speaks to the reason why people on the far right are like really kind of tired of like the very paper-handed moderate campaign that Trump is running, because like we need something very radical to push back against like the absolute godlessness that exists amongst these people, dude. Now, obviously, that can't entirely be solved with just being radical at the campaign level. This needs to be solved with people actually being involved at the local level, and stop just like, you know, abdicating and outsourcing like all of the civic duty to people who literally hate you. You know, and one of the top things that kind of connected the dots for this specifically was the example, and I believe it was Tristan Tate who said this. You know, a lot of the reason why the social discourse amongst men is very kind of odd and passive aggressive, as well as just in the overall social fabric of how men operate in day-to-day functions, lives, carry themselves, their posterity, is because they outsource their masculinity and defense capabilities to a specific department called the police or the FBI. So the average guy like literally has no reason to ever of his own accord do anything in defense of his home, unless it's literally happening in the moment at his own home, and obviously there's nothing else to do. You can't call the cops; they're not gonna be fast enough. And I think you can think the same exact thing with civic duty and responsibilities. I'm talking specifically to the people who say they just want to be left alone. This is the result of when you say you just want to be left alone and you abdicate any amount of vigilance or civic duty and you let it to whoever do it. And this is what you get. You get people who are arguing that that the potential costs of actually being tough on crime regarding a specific instance of sex trafficking of minors in a singular state, they go, it's going to cost us too much. That is the result of people who want to be just left alone, and you go off in the woods and you hide and you abdicate all civic duty, and the only time you ever show up is to just cast a vote in an election that we all know probably doesn't even matter, is probably rigged, and is probably being fortified in this moment, which is why it is imperative that you have at least some amount of stake in your local community. Now, I know that's what everyone says. People will go, well, just get active in your local community. I'm not saying go and stand on a sidewalk and hold a sign. I think some of that stuff is kind of worthless. I'm talking actually look for the openings and positions. When is the mayor going to be up? When is the state, not state treasurer, but when is like the school treasury position going to open up? When are these school board positions going to open? How can I be eligible for these different positions? Like even putting it on a map. But a lot of people find that to be too much work. It's too much to take on. And a lot of people, you know, their schedules are rife with a bunch of these things. But I would implore you, you know, is it important that you keep this, you know, ardent schedule that's very busy with a lot of busy stuff going on, or, you know, while, you know, you have to go work for 10 hours a day, your your kids are being taken care of by schools that have an ideological bent, essentially, in one that's hypersexualized and of secularism and progressive nature? Or do you want to just say, hey, maybe I'm going to have to take, you know, a 10K, a pay cut, and not work as many hours because I need to go divert some time to work in one of these other positions because this means more to me. Now, that's a decision that every individual person is going to have to make, but I think on the surface, you can sit there and go, yeah, it probably is worth it. And that's why I do what I do here, which is I think this is the best use of what I can do. I've also honestly contemplated on doing some kind of working myself into a local office. Now, obviously, with my history here on YouTube, I'm probably going to get a smear campaign about being a far-right extremist or something. But it's a thought and it's an idea, and it's one where if you even got, say, like 1 in 20 individuals who heard that and they went, maybe I should, we'd probably have a completely different fabric, at least at the grassroots aspect. There'd be a lot less of these instances of like one-offs, essentially what we saw with the woman earlier who's stealing, you know, $15 million or $1.5 million worth of chicken wings. You'd probably see a lot less of that kind of just rampant abuse of finances and having just no accountability, no responsibility. And we'd probably move away from this push into secularism that's anti-family, anti-white, anti-anything good, honestly, anti-Christian at most. So that was my point on that. And then another big issue before we actually go into the Elon Musk stuff is two things, really. The first, and I'll go here, we're moving off of this though. And this is from Mario Nafal on Twixer or Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. Google News bias is revealed. 63% of content from left-leaning sources. 63% of articles on Google News are reportedly sourced from left-leaning outlets. Now, again, I bet every single one of the people in the audience here doesn't even need me to tell you this. You just know it. You know that these things lean left. But I think what we're getting here, though, is from the New York Post, actually breaking down an article, though, and putting it in paper, putting it actually in context for people to understand. You know, on the left is the obviously largest margin here, and then center and left-leaning is the biggest portion, right? So left-leaning is what makes up the majority of that graphic there. And then on the right is obviously a very, very much smaller portion. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up, and I think it's important to go here, is for one specific reason. And that is that the Justice Department has actually said and recently ruled that Google does indeed have a monopoly on the search market industry. I'm not sure if this is going to go move to a full-blown antitrust, and I'm not even sure how they would kind of even want to integrate it. But I think the argument there that lies within is the fact that I think most, if not all, default browsers default to Google search. YouTube kind of defaults to Google search. Many things default on Google's end, thus implying that they have some kind of, they possess a vast, if not the majority, of the most valuable real estate that would exist in that market itself. So there could be a potential antitrust lawsuit that maybe breaks apart Google that kind of works against the left-leaning bias. But who's to say that the market that gets filled up afterwards doesn't do the exact same thing, especially because it seems to be in most corporate interests to go woke, regardless of how broke that may make you. So it's something to keep an eye on. It's something that is very positive and something I actually didn't think I would see in my lifetime. And I think most people honestly kind of had this idea that Google has monopolized the search engine ever since, Yahoo became non-existent, really. And that was because, you get an iPhone, you buy it brand new right out of Walmart or somewhere, not Walmart, but like Verizon store or something. Well, you go to Safari, and what is Safari's default search engine? So all of these things, the default, I think, is the argument in which they're going to say, like, hey, if they remove that Google is the default, maybe that's the positioning they'll take, and then try to integrate some form in which that there is no default browser. Not sure how any of these things will work, obviously, but at least they have said or spoken to the fact that they believe that Google is a monopoly. So time will tell and what actions they take to kind of break it apart, or what they would do moving forward with that. Now, that's been from the Justice Department with the recent ruling of that. And we already know how the bias works. The bias is actually very overtly obvious to anybody who pays attention, even with Elon Musk kind of showing it here too. And that's a portion of what we're going to get into with Elon Trump reactions. What media bias, as this Time magazine of Donald Trump is literally like this disgusting, grotesque figure trying to show him in a bad light, orange man bad, bleach blonde hair. And then you get this woman with Kamala Harris, which is just like this very righteous, like, very, very Renaissance type painting, like, wow, so beautiful, so strong. And then his is like this minimalistic kind of horrorcore Five Nights at Freddy looking garbage. But as promised, we are hitting the 1 hour mark. I'm going to go ahead and drop the other stuff I was going to talk about. We'll move on to the Elon Musk, Donald Trump interview that occurred. And if I have time, I will go back to some of the other stuff that I had. So let me bring it here. The Trump-Elon space broke the internet. Not even just literally, but figuratively as well. I was trying to watch it early on. I knew I wasn't going to be able to stream it just because of the way my schedule worked yesterday. But I tried watching it from like the moment that they got it, not even just announced, but the moment it was going to start in the spaces, and it was broken, literally. So they suffered from a DDoS attack, and I saw somebody probably try to chat in there. It looks like YouTube's making sure that's not happening. There's a DDoS attack, right? So DDoS is direct denial of service. It's essentially just overloading the servers with as many inbound data connections as possible. So as I explained to my wife, because she didn't understand this either. So imagine you open up a browser and you open up, 1,000 tabs, and then all at once you hit enter on every single one of these tabs to go to Wikipedia And so and then at one moment, Wikipedia has like the thousands of inbound data connections trying to pull server data from it. It just causes like a very, very bad traffic jam. It kind of gums up the data connection very, very poorly. But that was what preceded the event. There was kind of concerns like maybe we'll just go with a small group and post a pre-recorded interview afterwards. And you even got Elon Musk, who said they tested the system earlier in the day with 8 million concurrent listeners, and it worked fine. So if anything, that speaks to the level of the attack that occurred, because they were overwhelming a system that already was able to withstand 8 million concurrent. That means that they had to have had some kind of large system in place that was DDoSing over millions and millions of individual direct connections that were inbound data grabs. So we'll start here with the fact that the knives are out for both Elon and Trump. The media cannot handle the freedom of discussion. This is from Ian Miles Chong. The knives are out for Elon and Trump. He says also that they're terrified of the fact they both left a positive impression on listeners, that they're both decent and likable people who only want what's best. And the media is terrified it is no longer relevant. X cuts out the middleman. All is as it should be. I'm getting another notification. It's crazy. But let me go ahead and make this a bit bigger here. And you can see this. I don't know how well you can see this on screen. I'll try to make it a little bit bigger if I can. Yeah, it's not going to work. It's just, USA Today has an article. Reuters has an article. The LA Times has an article. The Washington Post, The Independent, MSNBC, Variety, Wired, AZ Central, the New York Times, Politico, CNN, and every single one of them, right? Look at this one in particular. Elon Musk throws a Trump rally. Like, man, dude, they can't just talk to each other, right? It couldn't just be a simple discussion, and everything's got to honestly be given this preamble too. Like, Trump rambles, slurs his way through Elon Musk interview. It was an unmitigated disaster. But imagine having the confidence to say that, even though it probably did the most numbers out of anything ever, period. And I'm not sure many people even saw this, and I'll go here next. This is from Leading Report as well. The interview with the former Trump generated a total of 998 million views on X between 7:47 p.m. and 10:47 p.m. in a 3-hour period. Compared to the previous Super Bowl, which I believe did 124 million in a similar time frame, this blew the Super Bowl out of the water. And I think where it is at currently is well over 1 billion and approaching 2 billion, which is quite insane. So you're right, in a 3-hour period, I believe about, something around like 11 to 12% of the entire world was listening to what was going on in that conversation. Maybe not the whole thing, but they at least tuned in, or they were impressed upon by it in some way. Quite astonishing if you ask me. I didn't even think it was going to do these kinds of numbers. I figured that many other countries had probably put a lot of stops in place to ensure that it didn't even, become discoverable in forms that you would, get your homepage, kind of like how you do here at YouTube when you sign in. It's like, here's the stuff you want to watch. I figured they'd probably find different kind of, nefarious ways to mess with that. But they did, obviously, because I believe that, if anything, that DDoS attack was an intentional one that probably came, and especially for the size that it was, it either had to come from U.S. intelligence or it came from the UK or the EU, one of those groups, seeing how both have a huge bone to pick with Elon, and they can't be having free speech. Otherwise, their plans will be foiled if things are to be made transparent as they should be. Now, I thought a funny aspect about this, too, was what Elon said about afterwards. He said, "I'd happy to host Kamala on an X Spaces." Like, we know she's not going to do that. She wouldn't be able to do it. She'd be like screaming after like 20 minutes, man. She'd be complaining about how it's so unfair, how Elon must hate black women, and it's just him asking a very basic question. And I just thought it was funny. He kind of threw it out there because he obviously would have it with Kamala, but we all know that Kamala would never take him up on it. I kind of hope that she does, though. I would kind of like to see the comparison there and see how she would fare doing a 2 to 3 hour kind of conversation with Elon Musk being pressed upon on the same issues. Now, to her, though, that would actually probably be the first hard interview she'd probably have done, period, in the last 4 or 5 years. Now, I do have a couple of promo videos that Donald Trump dropped, because Donald Trump not only just came back and hosted his spaces, but it seems like he's also posting on X once more. Now, I know I've spoken to this in the past as well, and as far as I understand, he can't completely come back to X exclusively, because he's financially tied in with Truth Social. Truth Social being a public platform, and also being, funded by other people who aren't Donald Trump, can then file an FEC claim saying if Trump goes to X unknowingly and starts using that as his primary platform, that would obviously nearly completely void out all of the proposition value that exists in Truth Social, which is, this is the platform that Trump uses. This is his only platform because he got banned everywhere else, right? You take out that proposition value of the company, well, now then you're going to sink that company that you're financially tied to and in fact have obligations for. So people have been putting forward that it is about $4.6 billion in valuation, Truth Social is, and that if Elon Musk was to buy it and merge it in some form, it would allow Trump to come back without, breaking any financial ties or not doing his financial duty to the people who have invested into that company. But I will go to a couple of these ones that he posted, because I haven't actually seen the first one I'm about to play. This is a promo video directly from Donald Trump from yesterday. I'm not sure how many people saw it, but again, he's making sure he's putting out the campaign material. 10 million views. So this one did a lot, way less than what he had previously on his on the spaces, obviously. So he's not getting the same play as he normally would be. And it sees from Nate Otten, all money and power and own pocket policy. Shame. I'm not sure what you mean by that. But I guess it's more specifically, I think it is a huge disadvantage that he's not currently on X. I think most people can recognize that if Trump was on X, he'd probably be swinging a lot harder and a lot more for the fences and have a lot more direct influence on the day-to-day conversation. But again, I'm going to play this video, and if there's any issues with sound, please let me know. I will adjust accordingly.
Is New York's Donald Trump running for president? He bought full-page ads in 3 East Coast newspapers today stating his views on foreign policy, and these ads will win him a following. In the ads, he says, there's nothing wrong with American foreign policy that little backbone won't cure. And he says, we have no business spending ourselves broke in the Middle East, protecting ships that are not ours, and oil that we don't need.
Rumblings in the Trump camp point as far as the presidency.
Somebody has to help this country, and if they don't, the country and the world are in big trouble. Because within a short period of time, as sure as we're sitting here, there's not going to be a country and there's not going to be a world.
I have no intention of running for president, and if it got so bad, I would never want to rule it out totally.
Together we will determine the course of America and the world for many, many years to come. For too long, a small group in our nation's capital has reaped the rewards of government, while the people have borne the cost. That all changes, starting right here and right now, because this moment is your moment. It belongs to you. The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer.
Trump leading in 5 of the 6 most important battleground states.
Biden continues to trail Donald Trump. Our latest polling out of Iowa also shows former President Trump with a 30-point lead over his nearest rival.
The Republican primary is over.
Donald Trump basically has this nomination locked up.
Everyone is listening to you now. I will fight for you with every breath in my body, and I will never, ever let you down. My fellow Americans, our movement is far from over. In fact, our fight has only just begun.
So really powerful right there. And Human Girl says, hey, but if I was to make it, that's the first thing I'd go with if my account was a robot. But I just want to say this shot right here, that's glorious. What a beautiful setup right there. I mean, that captures some like real energy. It's just a very like cinematic. I haven't seen something like this since The Lord of the Rings. Like that's glory right there. really powerful stuff. They do really well with the promos for Donald Trump. But again, as somebody who actually feels, very, very motivated by Donald Trump himself and the rhetoric as well, obviously it probably appeals more to me and the right wingers than it would people from the left. People from the left probably view this and they go, wow, look at all of these Nazis. Look how they get so Hitlerian, or whatever the word they want to use to describe that. And what I noted about this, though, was how it's very, very appealing to everybody and all. But let me show you the dark the dark Donnie dark mega version of themselves. This one's a bit shorter, but some Aristophanes. It's one of the larger dark mega accounts that exist. And I essentially just wrote, like, who needs this kind of promo when the Anons go the distance that they do. So this is a dark mega, if you can tell by the profile picture and the laser eyes. So this is another smaller promo released at a similar time. And they're all good. They're all good. And I think that you guys should see them.
If you don't mind, I'm not going to be nice. Is that okay?
So I think that captures a bit more of the masculine energy that you see coming from the dark mega crowd that get the laser eyes. It's phenomenal. It's all very, very inspiring. At least I feel it in my soul when I'm watching this stuff. Like, I can feel like the white boy summer and all the energy that comes from, taking your country back, make America great again. And it's a good sign, because I was somebody who was saying, like, the 2016 energy is just not there. I'm not going to go as far as it's the dissident groups with, like, the Fuenteses, although I see what they're coming from, and I agree largely with a lot of what they're saying. But again, you have to understand there's a specific way that the election has to be won. There's a specific way that you have to appeal and win culture piece by piece. So everything's all good seemingly now, given right after the Elon Trump debate. And I guess my main point really should be, let's hope that we hold this momentum, like, stop letting small instances kind of break us apart with the infighting, because we had a really bad, rough time leading up to this, going from the RNC convention, which was kind of like argued about constantly with the tokenism that was there, the Amber Rose scandal with the Matt Walsh coming into it, even the CCG Brysons of the world having opinions about, this shouldn't be the first day speaker for the RNC. It seems kind of ridiculous. It doesn't speak to the values. Then you get the JD Vance pick that happened later in that conference, or it might have been the first day as well. But then people got torn apart from that, more infighting. Then you have the Kyle Rittenhouse debacle. Then you have the Joe Rogan issue. And so all of these things leading up, and I might even be missing a few that I'm not thinking of, all like in a short span, as well as you have the polling data. You have the poly market that opened up at a 6% disadvantage for Trump. Then you have the money market along with the predicted market, not only just showing with, about 35 million money market shares favoring Kamala. I think it's at an 8.5%, but in a smaller market with 20 million shares, they're predicting that it's not even just going to be a win for her, but a blowout. So all of these things leading to a lot of infightings, particularly because people are going, well, it's a psyop. I can't believe you believe the polls. And other people are saying, well, it's not just this poll, it's all of these. And so really what it seemed to be was like a very on shaky ground, too many poor things, so many issues that come from the Big Tent conservatism. Now, I think there are still a lot of issues that come from Big Tent conservatism that have led us to be in the positions we're in, which is to continually to infight because we're trying to uphold this value over here and uphold this value over here. Seems kind of nonsensical. But I think as long as we can tighten things in and he goes strong on the anti-immigration like how he did in the debate with Elon, although he didn't speak much to it, he did say it will be the most and the biggest deportation team we'll see, the most deportations that this country will have ever seen. And so it's good to see a bit more of that energy come back into it on things that he was running on very, very early on. So broke the internet, crazy amount of views, Spaces was down for quite a while with the massive DDoS attack, and I think we're going to get a bit more regarding this. Now, Elon Musk actually had a statement to say before this regarding the DDoS attack, and people wanting to tell him to be responsible for European rules. I know people aren't going to appreciate the language, but this is Elon Musk. To be honest, I really wanted to respond with this Tropic Thunder meme, but I would never do something so rude and irresponsible. And this comes because a large figure from the EU, Thierry Breton, is a European commissaire, or commissar, I think is the actually more correct pronunciation, on the European Commission. She wrote to Elon Musk on behalf of the UK and the EU to be responsible. And I'm not going to read any of this, really just kind of summarize it for you. But they specifically lay out the fact that X is considered a very large platform for all these reasons, and that he needs to take all of these specific measures to ensure that harmful content doesn't come about. And, and in response, he posts this. I think it's great, right? I'm glad that he's standing up for American values and saying, hey, this is America, and you're not going to tell me what to do with free speech. And let alone not even just on the American basis, but rather just being a herald for free speech in general, I think is a good thing. But a bad update on this, because they did indeed keep their word. As far as I understand, this is not a suing, but the UAW union they're going to file federal labor charges against Donald Trump and Elon Musk after their space last night. So they're saying it's nothing more than a political hit job on behalf of the Kamala Harris campaign, and this is from Nick Sortor. But again, it seems like they were willing to at least back up what they wanted to do. Unfortunate, but again, not surprising. And I think anyone who's at least followed in at least the last couple of episodes I've done covering the UK riots, I've made mention multiple times, and we had that one from Mark Rowley, who is the UK police commissioner, and that's who the individual who was on TV in an interview actually threatened the extradition of Americans for their online post. Also said, Elon's not, I can't remember how he worded it, but he essentially said Elon's also one of the potential people we might look to. And I made the point too as well, I would imagine if it came to that, Kamala Harris would be like, yep, here's Elon, take him. We ain't going to protect him. Obviously, because it would be in both of their best interests to get rid of the billionaire who is essentially the singular reason why we have the transparency and free speech that we do. I can't even imagine what it would be like if we didn't have X in its current form right now. We'd probably be we would be in the worst timeline, I think, if that was the case. But to move on from this, though, we'll get some more of these reactions that we saw. I think this is something to keep an eye on, too. I think the EU is not going to play around when it comes to their digital abuse laws. I think anyone who's followed and seen the arrest, we have 52-year-olds getting arrested for just yelling at police, getting sentenced 2 years in prison. Very, very dark stuff happening over there. And I think it parallels with what we are probably going to see here if Donald Trump does not win the next election. And Human Girl Sandor was definitely being sarcastic. He was definitely being sarcastic about that. But while the space was going on, I think this happened, shortly after. Forgive me, my neck had to crack. This is from Colin Rugg. The Kamala campaign sent out an unhinged email. And I'll put it on screen now. They released an unhinged campaign email. Now, what you can see from this, right now, Elon Musk is interviewing Donald Trump live on Twitter. We're not calling it X. Who does this appeal to? I guess I'm so, my values and who I hang with is so far away from this stuff that this stuff only really kind of reads off as really bad parody. But I guess, right? But let's read the rest of it, right? It says, it's not enough that Musk has pledged to donate millions of dollars to help reelect Trump, which I believe is entirely fake, forgive me. He was talked about that $45 million pledge. But he said that he actually was not going to do that. He essentially just endorsed him with word of mouth. He's using his purchase platform, one of the largest social media sites in the world, to spread Trump's unhinged and hateful agenda to millions of users. Oh, right. And then if that's all you need to hear, chip in $25 now to help Kamala and Tim. It's begging. Money, please. It's like that meme from Parks and Rec. She's just money, please. It's so sad. And to think you're going to keep sending out these really, really begging emails even after the fact that the Act Blue scandal was pretty blown apart in the mainstream. It's like you got to be a real sucker to give any amount of dollar to these people, because next thing you know, you might have your entire identity being used to circulate funding from a super PAC because they want to avoid the money or financial limits that they are allowed to contribute to a presidential campaign. But then it says there in bold, the richest person in the world is a lackey for Team MAGA. Like, yeah, right. You know, and I think we're in a how dare a billionaire or how dare an owner of a social media endorse a political candidate? How dare these people have feelings and sentiments? But seemingly no one ever gave a care in the world when it was all entirely left-wing bias, when Mark Zuckerberg's doing whatever he wants with his left-wing platform. Whenever, you know, speaking of, you know, literally any other platform, as long as it's left-wing, not a care in the world, right? Obviously people on the right would point these things out and say, hey, they're clearly, this is biased. And then when Elon Musk does it, they cry like, woe is me, like, oh my gosh, he's breaking everything down, the disinformation. And I go back to that first tweet that we reacted to at the beginning of this. How many innocent people are going to die because Trump talked to Elon? It's like what reality you're living in, dude? It's just like some kind of isekai like anime, like you're just in some like weird reality where you hit by a car and you woke up yesterday. Like, I don't know, a lot of these things that just don't make sense, but I guess it's not even surprising either. It's to be expected that we're getting these kind of absurd reactions here. Now, moving off of this though, there was, again, a large sect of people who are completely disinterested. And again, this is the Groper crowd. This is the people who are joining in on the Groper War 2 that are essentially wanting to, they're not going against Trump. They want Trump to be more radical, right? They're not anti-Trump. They want Trump to be more radical. That is the point that I think gets missed. Because a lot of people go, well, everything you're doing is going to be pro Kamala, and I think that's the mistake there. And so I'll start with somebody who's a bit more on the middle of the road before we go to more of the harder dissident right individuals. So I'll start here with this Cassandra McDonald, formerly Cassandra Fairbanks. And if you are familiar with her or not familiar with her, I guess I should say, Cassandra is one of the I believe she's not only just a writer, but she is the coordinator for Tim Pool's Timcast IRL, the primary guest scheduler, as well as coordinator for other events. And she even says, I am more interested in the Groper War 2 stream than the Musk-Trump stream, to be honest. I actually liked this because at this point when I was listening to it and I saw this tweet, it was indeed very boring. But it wasn't boring in like a bad way. I mean, more boring because it was like a grandpa talking to his autistic son. You know, like it just was like, it didn't have much substance beyond the fact that it was these two huge primary figures talking, not at least until I got a little bit later on when they started kind of wrapping or winding things down to ensure they got their final points in. You know, and Arthur Kwan Lee, who is somebody who runs the Dissident Review now, I believe, on the Stu Peters Network, he said, this is so boring, talk about Israel. Otherwise, this is just pandering. I think a lot of people are still very, very, very disappointed in the lack of coverage of Israel, the lack of separation or distancing of Israel as well. Now, this is something that I talk about quite a bit and I'm beginning to talk about a lot more as well. And I think that can be exemplified with the fact that we have this major story that broke that was not picked up nearly at all by any mainstream publication outside of people like Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes, really. And I think Jake Shields covered it on his podcast, but he's not really a main pundit. He's kind of building his platform, but he's not there at the top level yet. And that was the fact that you did have the Israeli government or certain politicians in the Israeli government arguing, or I guess let me start it from the beginning. A Palestinian man was gang raped by 9 IDF soldiers. There were then protests in Israel to free the soldiers because the protesters said that the soldiers should be allowed to do that if they wished. And that's because they viewed the Nakba, these individuals, as less than human. And with that, there was protest. They eventually let these IDF soldiers out. And then you had, not even just in paper and writing, you had a video evidence. I say evidence, but it was literally just a screen recording of the Israel Knesset cabinet members arguing amongst themselves because there was portions of them who were demanding that these soldiers be allowed to do what they do and demand that people understand that these other individuals are less than human and they forbade all their rights. Very, very just nasty, very immoral stuff. And the reason I bring that up is because it later went on to be that these soldiers are now completely free. They're not going to be getting pressed any charges. And in fact, that the argument was that they gang raped this man in self-defense. The entire story is completely reprehensible. But again, it follows this track of a lot of other very, very questionable at best, but immoral at worst actions that Israel takes. And we continually to hammer this down at the very top of the GOP that Israel's our greatest ally, and that if we don't, send our men and women overseas to defend them, then it's this great detriment to society. Now, I know this is it gets to be a bit more esoteric, but as I have done news and been following along with these different instances and issues, I'm beginning to find it to be a lot bigger problem than before. And I think even particularly outside of just the financial reign and sending our finances over there when we're dying over here, not only getting choked out by inflation, but our debt is breaking through the ceiling. I never thought possible, is the fact that it's going to push us into a world war conflict when we could simply just step away and stop trying to use the Middle East as essentially a war ground to just continue churning the military industrial complex that all it does is churn out money and dollars for corporations while taking and sucking the souls of individuals like you and I for the purpose of enriching other individuals who are, again, godless heathens at best. Now, to move on from here, though, we did have a reaction from Sneeko, which was in a bit of a different light. And again, if anyone who didn't hear it, at the very beginning, it was kind of awkward because Elon was stuttering quite a bit. And so Sneeko kind of compared it to the fact that this was a high school teenager really kind of meeting his school or his high school crush or something like that. And, I can't get it out of my head because it's pretty accurate. So I'll go ahead and put it on screen here. So Sneeko calls out Elon Musk for publicly endorsing Trump. He says any other major platform with a CEO is publicly endorsing a candidate would be a shitstorm. The news would be all over it. If X is really a free speech platform, the CEO should not be publicly glaring at a nominee like this. It's embarrassing. Now, I actually disagree completely with what he's saying here. But we'll go ahead and play it and I'll tell you why.
Elon is stuttering and gushing and gasping like it's his idol. This should not happen on a platform where he's the CEO. Think about the hate that Mark Zuckerberg would get doing this with Kamala Harris. The hate that Susan Wojcicki Recipes would get if she was on YouTube. Any other major platform where the CEO is publicly endorsing a presidential candidate, it would be a shitstorm. The news would be all over it. People would say that should be banned. And if X is really a free speech platform, the CEO should not be publicly glazing a nominee like this. It's embarrassing.
He says it's embarrassing, but I don't think it is at all. And if anything, everything I've shown you leading up to this point has been insane reactions from people for exactly what he's saying. Like there literally is a shitstorm occurring regarding this because everyone thinks it's like the worst detriment to the entire planet that these two men simply talk to each other over essentially a public phone call. Now he might think it's embarrassing. I think if anything, the only thing that kind of seemed slightly embarrassing or was cringy was like, it did seem like he was stuttering, like as if Elon Musk was meeting his childhood hero. But outside of that, it's like, again, we live in a free country. And I think that as long as you live in a free country, regardless of how much money you have or what you own, you should be able to publicly endorse whoever you want. If anything, I'll be honest, I think that it would be better if every single one was transparent. And I think, in fact, what happens is when Mark Zuckerberg plays this ridiculous line of like, oh, well, I'm not going to endorse any candidate, but I'm going to use every ounce of leverage I have to work against the right for the left, is like, you don't even need to tell me at this point. Like, I can tell by your actions, you clearly do support the left wing. Maybe not publicly going to endorse a specific candidate, but it's clear where your agenda and values lie. And to think that we have not been inundated with that level of rhetoric and social reinforcement and pressure for the last, 10 years, if not even longer than that, in weaker forms, is just like, did Sneeko lose the plot here? And, maybe he could have, as he's been around a lot more of Islamic influences here lately. He even had one where he's talking about how, it's actually better to be homosexual than say that Jesus is God. And like, that was just like, there's no way I would have been able to sit there in a room like that without going the full distance and arguing. But he just kind of sat there and took it again. He's not around the best influences at all the time, but he is one of the better ones at speaking truth to power. I don't agree with all of his takes, but I thought that one was just awful. The news would be all over it. Like open your phone and go to Google. Like, bro, what do you mean? It's all over it right now, man. Like, I'm talking about it as a small pundit. I'm sure every single large creator streamed it when it happened. Like even Tim Pool did, Nick Fuentes did, at least some of the people I follow all did. I just don't understand what this point really is outside of like, he just wants Elon to not have a side, not pick a side. And it's like, free speech isn't about being objective. Free speech is about being absolutely free, whatever form that may come in. And to think that like there's ever exist in society a like 50-50 point you can sit upon, it's just not true. It just simply isn't. It's told over and over and over in the Bible, or even if you wanted to go to Islam or Judaism, it is good versus evil, right? There's no middle point between those two, right? Now, sure, there's gray areas when there's hard choices to be made, but every single one of those stem back to the foundation of which something is either of bad origins, bad and evil origins, or something is of good origin, something is of good or of the light. It is positive. So I guess for Sneeko in particular, who's been nonstop attacking things like degeneracy and pedophilia and all of just being a red pill avenger, really, in those aspects of like how the social rot has reached different levels. This was just kind of like out of nowhere, really. I was like, I cannot agree with this take in any form. It's so bad. It's just so out there. It's so wrong. It's so off base. That's where I'll leave it for that. Human Girl said, and your president's just at the beach chilling. I did see that one. It looked like Biden is probably just, I feel bad for him at this point because he's just getting pushed and pulled in 100 different directions, loaded up and injected with a million different like pro drugs. Forgive me. And I did see him laying on the beach. It looked really sad. It looked like he was struggling to breathe, like just laying in a lawn chair, like someone help me. Feel bad though. I do have a take though from Candace Owens, because she, as if anything, she's probably the biggest pundit who is adjacent, halfway allied with the Groyper movement. Obviously, that you can. That indictment came with her terrible exit from the Daily Wire, some of which we still don't know if it was a break of contract or if it was an actually like simply non-renegotiation. Time will tell with that. But this is from Ray on Twitter, and I'll pull it on screen here as well. Now, this is a 3-minute segment here. I believe it's going to be Candace Owens and then Nick reacting to that. But she says, I was pretty shocked when I saw Groyper War trending on Twitter. So we're going to go ahead and listen to this clip here. And once again, any issue with the sound, please let me know.
So I'm overseas in Europe, periodically checking in to see what's going on in the American political world. And I was pretty shocked when I saw Groyper War trending on Twitter, literally overseas here in Europe. That's how big of a trend it was. And I was shocked by it because obviously I've discussed the fact that you have these anonymous accounts which feature a frog, like Pepe the Frog is what is featured on them. And essentially they have amassed independently tons of followers across the internet, and the movement is led by Nick Fuentes. And apparently, according to this trend on Twitter, Nick Fuentes has declared war on the MAGA campaign, and people are writing about it all over, what's actually going on. Well, I will allow you to hear what exactly Nick Fuentes said in his declaration of MAGA war. Is that what we're calling it? Take a listen.
Before we get to that, I will address your comment. She says, I don't like her. She is angry all the time. I get this sentiment because of the last probably like 2-3 months, probably even 4 months since she has been excised from the mainstream side of the Republican GOP, the top of the top brass, if you will, of the pundits and thought leaders. She's kind of had a bone to pick with everybody, and so she's independent, so she's doing that. But even in a bigger, in the macro, I think as a Christian, and I can even speak to this, I think the closer I've gotten to God and the more I've actually kind of honed in on what I truly believe and sat down and thought about my moral compass and wanted to strengthen my own, not only just historical, but theological and philosophical basis for what I think and why I feel these ways. I think the closer you do come to be a Christian, the more angry you do get at what you see and what's going on. So not a whole defense of Candace, but a slight defense. And I think particularly for her, when she had so many people coming at her, that's probably what put her in a position to be like that. You said, I've been watching her since she first came up years back. Yeah, and I have not been an ardent follower of Candace. I really only started following her a lot more once she started her exit from the Daily Wire, and I was really tuned in with the Israel influence and everything that's been going on in that. But I'll let this is going to be Nick Fuentes giving his address though to initiate Groper War II.
Dare I say it? I am declaring a new Groper War against the Trump campaign until we can figure out what the hell is going on. I'm declaring a new Groper War. You have alienated us. You have ignored us. You don't listen to our concerns. We have been left behind. The Trump movement and the GOP have moved on without us. It serves Israel and corporations and immigrants, but it doesn't serve Native Americans. What about Native Americans? What about Americans? What about young white men and others too? But what about us? Charlie Kirk is to the right of Trump on immigration. That's unacceptable. So I think it's time for another Groper War. We're bigger, better, stronger than ever. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Rumble. This is a big live stream every night. We have allies. So I think it's time to up the ante a little bit. Joker 2 is premiering in October. Joker 2, 5-year anniversary. The show is back. We're opening the chest. I think it's time for Groper War 2. And this time, we're going all out. Justice once. And we will bring the energy. It's just a question of whether they want to get on board or get out of the way. That's the question. But we will bring, the Groypers will bring the energy. Memes, edits, replies, trolls. Get with us or get the out of the way. Groper War 2 coming soon.
So he obviously initiates his Groper War, and I believe that call came on Monday, if not Monday night when he did his show. I'm not sure. And if you even go to the actual Donald Trump space, I believe that most of the replies that are the top replies to anything on all the comments there were all from Nick Fuentes or Fuentes associated groups. And there are obviously other large pundits there too, like Cat Turd and Gunther Eagleman, who are very, very big reply guys. You said 2015. I actually loosely followed politics my entire life. Didn't really get into it fully until around 2020. So I'm a lot newer to the game than I think most people. Although I have followed it simply because I had a very, very strong like moral compass influence from my father, who kind of pointed me in the right directions. And then when I finally got more and more interested in it, especially around 2020 when, COVID and everything was going on, and I'm like, what is going on? That slowly began my pull into politics and wanting to voice my opinion and understand things and then really kind of see things for what they were. In regards to the Groper War, though, this again is being done from those who feel that they are all to the right of Donald Trump and they don't think what his campaign is proposing is good enough. So in that light, you did have a lot of people who are actually wanting to push the pendulum even further than what Trump is laying it out to be. Now, I think for a lot of people that displeases them, given the fact that the optics of Nick Fuentes is so bad and it's so, not that it's indefensible, but he obviously carries so much weight, this big preamble of white supremacists, white this, neo-Nazi this, all of this. And so it follows this constant, like, Trump, do you condemn him? Trump, do you condemn him? And it becomes like this hard kind of burden to carry when the media is so dead set on ensuring that nobody listens to Fuentes and they poison the well as much as possible with that. But I think most of what they're saying is warranted. And I even made the point too, I thought it was kind of wild that the Kamala Harris, white dudes for Harris, that the left appealed on a campaign basis to white men before the Trump campaign did. Explicitly, at least that is. Now, even I made that point where I was like, that was kind of shocking to me. I would have imagined that I would have seen a white dudes for Trump kind of like energy or explicit nature to that well before I saw a white dudes for Harris. But I think in particular, the campaign done by the Kamala Harris saw the lack, or at least the precaution, the timid nature of wanting to do that, so scared to being called racist, that they stepped in and then they did it. And now if the Trump campaign does it, all it will look like is not only just a copy of Kamala, but also then get drugged down in optics with it being racist. So Vincent James on Twitter makes this point too, along with what was going on with Susan Wiles, because one of the top calls for what's going on is to fire not only Susan Wiles, who's pictured here, who is the campaign manager or one of the campaign managers for the Trump campaign, but also Chris LaCivita. And Chris LaCivita is an individual who, absurdly enough, has made statements about how Donald Trump should have been, jailed for the insurrection, and also some other really, really bad comments that really kind of ring to the Never Trumper tune, that even I am like, Chris LaCivita should be fired outright. And even if it wasn't anything to do with the campaign, that's not somebody who should be given the reins or the keys to the campaign either. I know less about Susan Wiles, but this is from Vincent James. It says the Trump campaign manager says conservative values no longer win elections, and it's now appealing to Hispanic and Black voters. Once again, this move away from embracing white individuals as an oppressed group, and also a huge turn away from doing anything or dealing with anything, which is the great replacement, right? Or white replacement at large, especially given the fact that we're seeing what we are seeing in the UK. Taking this stance is just, to me, one way to ensure that you rot out the base, or at least the majority of people who do make up your base. Now, he goes further, saying that she basically says she doesn't want to appeal to white people anymore, even though that's 9 out of 10 Trump voters in 2020 and 2016. And it's literally how he got more votes than they can steal in 2016. So it's a 45-second clip. We'll go ahead and take a listen to her say it for herself.
We knew going into this election that it really was time to change the Republican coalition. The traditional Republican voter coalition just simply can't, I don't believe, elect Republicans any longer. So beginning to bring into the tent a larger number of Hispanic voters, certainly making it palatable for African Americans to think. We've talked to, we looked at vastly different voter groups than we had before. We talked to them, we understood what was important to them, we honored their traditions, and I'm happy to say, proud to say that it worked.
So human girl commenting, why is it always about race? Well, the unfortunate thing now is it's like Pandora's box, or maybe rather pushing a snowball down the hill, and now it is becoming an avalanche. It doesn't even matter now at this point who started it, who was making it about race first. The reality is that a lot of people, and even before the rhetoric was even there, people vote along these lines. People identify along these lines. People delineate and make choices along these lines. People choose whether to go for wings along these lines. A lot of decisions people make, whether they want to be truthful about them or not, are made by along lines like this. It says, like, yous are not all human. And that's the point, right? But I think the point means, the point being there, though, and specifically, there are actually different issues that plague different ethnicities among even us here in America. And particularly in the white community, there is an issue of like symbology and what's the other word I'm thinking of? Just outright subversion. I think this can be easily pointed out in just advertising campaigns. P&W Gorilla actually put out a video not too long ago. He's on another bigger account on X, and it's about 2 minutes long, and it flashes, I think, one of every frame of all of the interracial pushing and subversion campaigns that were done by advertisements that essentially nonstop showing black men with white women in an attempt to essentially demoralization. And that's been done much at greater lengths and in different forms than simply just through advertising campaigns But there is a definite anti-white sentiment that does exist in the country. And so when you're looking to change that, as a lot of people who support Trump do want that to change, and they don't see anything speaking to it. And in fact, the opposite, like what Susan Wiles is putting forward here, in fact, that they need to abandon the people who make up the majority of his base in an attempt to pitch a bigger tent than what already exists. It turns a lot of people away because they don't see anything changing. They see more of the same. And that's what it turns out to be. And that's what I see too with Susan Wiles and Chris LaCivita. I think in particular, to not own up to the fact or own up to the fact that you understand or even know or are aware of the ridiculous anti-white sentiment that exists, not even just in the social fabric of every individual, but it's institutionalized, in things like critical race theory. It's institutionalized in different forms, through the DOE as well as Hollywood. It's reinforced in 110 different ways. And then to run a campaign where you seemingly are just, I guess, ignorant about that stuff, it turns off a lot of people because they're like, you're not appealing to me. Like, these are issues that affect me, and I haven't heard you say anything to them. Now, if you can take it even further and take it up a notch to the macro of illegal immigration, and then you speak more to the fact of the illegal immigration that's not coming from Mexico, but it's coming from Venezuela, it's coming from a lot of sub-Saharan African countries, you're getting an actual outright removal or I guess breaking of what used to be homogenized American culture. And then you do see a lot of things where we are seeing a lot of now Muslim influence coming into the country. You're seeing a lot of neighborhoods being, ran with, I guess, Sharia law and things of that nature as well. So a lot of these things all do come in the frame of being anti-American and anti-white as well. And so I think when you do get people who are on the dissident right, who do align much more along the white nationalist lines or even Christian nationalist lines, they see this degradation of society and they go, this is the number one thing we should be going at. And I think that's why when people were pointing out that Trump was moving away from the mass deportation talks and speaking less to that, they were beginning to fear that maybe amnesty of these 20 to 40 million illegal immigrants may come even from the Trump administration. And so a lot of things like that, they put fear in people's eyes because it seems like it's not going to move the needle enough to fix the problems they're truly concerned about. I guess that's probably the best way I can put it, and that's the way that I see things. I'd go even a bit, forgive me, I'd go even a bit further to say that I think in particular, white men feel very, 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 not even just demoralized, but they're not participating in great rates too. You can see this with school, and you can see this with the job, with the employment market as well. It's unfortunate, and I think to, I guess, really kind of abandon your base and to pitch a bigger tent for big tent conservatism is where you lose not only me, but a lot of other people as well. It doesn't mean I'm not going to vote for Trump or go this whole distance or like, well, I'm going to withhold my vote or I'm going to write in Ron Paul like Kyle Rittenhouse. Like, no, not a chance. I still view that as throwing your vote away. It's more so like a tune-up. Like, can we make the campaign speak more to the values that we want to have? But I guess that's more of a side point. And I will go, it's hand in hand. Forgive me, man. And I'll show you some of these comments here on the spaces here. Well, here in Australia, it's the same. I feel terrible for you being in Australia. Got a frog in my throat. In particularly because not only did you have the gun buyback program, but you had the COVID lockdown camps. So much bad going on in Australia. So I do truly feel for you. Not to play anything from the space itself. Man. But to point out some of these comments here. The Persistent's doing a really good job making sure he gets in there. And he says, register to vote. That's what he does. He's really good at doing that stuff. Vigilant Fox, 11,000 likes here. He's huge space. See if I can't get to one of the first ones from Fuentes, one of these larger ones here. Because I believe most of his were at the very top. I would imagine rather if I organize this by most liked, we'll see that sooner. And once again, so the most liked comment then that does come on this page from Donald Trump is from Nick Fuentes, who did initiate the group war. What is up, Titan? I think it's pretty rare I see you actually on stream anymore. Well, I guess I see you pretty often, but it's nice to have you in here, brother. No more immigration. Forgive me, you came at a time where I literally can't speak either. America's full. Sincerely, your base. And he puts here sharply, more Americans want to curb immigration to the U.S. 55% want immigration levels reduced, the highest since 2001. 45,000 likes on that. Now, I think one of the big things that you can say with this on itself, I think people would even go, most people would go beyond just saying no more legal immigration, that needs to be curbed. But I think people would say we need to put a moratorium on even legal immigration. Like, we are at capacity, dude. We're dealing with inflation that's going to rip this country apart if we don't handle it the right way. I would be one of those people as well, where I would say, dude, I don't care if we don't get another immigrant, legal or illegal, for the next, 20 years, maybe 15 or 15, 20. I'd even put it on something along those lines. Thank you, Titan. Thank you for the super chat. I appreciate that very much, brother. Thank you. And as well, for everybody in this chat as well, too, I know I've had a good amount of concurrent viewers. Thank you for everybody for being here. I should have said that earlier. I wish that more people could truly, with courage, hold that position and say, dude, no more. But I think to even have a position like that, you have to literally want to be, you want to be American. You want to keep these American values. You have to have something that you want to desire. It has to be more than just a reactionary, we don't want them. Well, why don't you want more of them? And it's like, well, you have to have reasons for why, positive reasons for why you can't. And I think obviously the easiest argument for that is like, we're full, dude. He says, I do miss quite often. I think the last one I caught was a week ago. Oh, it's totally fine. I wish I could do daily. I wish I could find the time to do more often. I'm working on that right now. Right now I'm kind of like 2 days a week, but dude, either way, I appreciate you guys coming in here. Whether you watch it live or watch the clips afterwards, I appreciate it very much. But then I guess, again, to speak back to the immigration thing, that's one thing where I think both sides of the aisle could agree on this. And that's why I brought up the video and the instance that happened in New York, when you had a large crowd of New Yorkers that was predominantly black, who were all outside this hotel, who were like banging on the doors and getting mad with the police and saying like, why are you bringing more of them here, dude? There's no room. We can't, we're already struggling so bad out here. Like the prices, this and that. And so I think the sentiment exists on both sides of the aisle. They both sit there and they go, dude, we can't do this anymore. Whether it's from a financial position or it's from a cultural position, I think that's something that can cross both sides of the aisle. And so to see Trump kind of move away from the mass deportations, I think was a very fearful thing from the majority of the base, when they were like, is he really going to do it? Is he going to back up what he said? And I think people point to the wall and the fact that the wall never really became a full wall, what it was supposed to be. It's still unfinished in portions. And it was like, I hope it doesn't turn out to be another kind of empty promise like that, let alone surround yourself with people who are poor, like you did in your first administration, who will do everything in their power to prevent it from being done, because they're like, yeah, we got you, Trump. And the moment he's in, they're working against him. And they're like, actually, we'll do whatever we can to make sure Trump can't do this. That's what I think people can point out. That's easy to point out. And that's why I say, like, I could go back to my hometown and find two guys who I'd support at random way more than I would support, that I think would put my support behind a Susan Wiles or a Chris LaCivita. Now, and even to move away from immigration and move away from the Israel big tent stuff, I think most people can agree with this. My gosh, dude, I'm like struggling to speak. This is from, again, Cassandra McDonald. You can see the nice Timcast logo in her profile up here. Again, she's somebody who is a lot more middle of the aisle. I think she's slowly been moving to the right wing over time. But she, I think, would self-identify as a libertarian or a right-leaning libertarian, one that would be like in the Dave Smith comics kind of world, the not open border libertarian. But this is also in the mega big tent, right? This is a transgender individual or a non-binary, whatever you want to call it, cross-dresser, fill in the blank. And this is what gets cheers from people like Cat Turd and those on the right, who just simply are the Christless conservatives who it's hard to, I guess, even articulate outside of the fact that they just hold maybe classical liberal values, and they oppose progressivism as it is formed in the left wing. but they will support this when the Christian right clearly does not support stuff like this. And this is what you get when you have these issues with big tent conservatism. So just to make it even more screeching, I'm going to play this minute segment here because it is so unnerving. It's so weird. It's so mental illness. It's so cringe. But this is honestly a step further from, I guess, what would you call that? The Blair White. Blair White does as much as he possibly can to pass as a female and gets cheered on by those in the conservative movement simply because he will then in turn call out other transgenders. It's just one of those things where it doesn't make sense. It's like, wow, we got a good one. It's like, what does that even mean? It's like, what is the principle then, right? Like they can be transgender, but as long as they support Trump, it's fine. It's like, it's really no principle. And I think that speaks to the mega occultism that isn't as bad as what exists on the left, but I think does exist in some form. So let's go ahead and play this. Apologize, keep it on screen so long.
Hey y'all ladies and gentlemen, I'm Lady Mega USA and this is Sunshine and Sparkles in 1 minute. Let me put on my lip gloss. Y'all, we all want to look our best, but so often we make ourselves look real ugly. Y'all want to know why? It's from complaining. Ain't nobody looking their best when they're complaining. I want to look as pretty as a butterfly landing on a magnolia covered in sunlit dewdrops. But I only look that way if I'm talking about something I love or something I want. I also look great when I'm talking about possibilities or solutions to problems instead about what's going bad. Pay close attention to what you're talking about. If you're complaining, you look as ugly as a June bug squashed on a windshield. But if you're talking about what you love, possibilities, or solutions, you're just gonna look.
So you don't even need to play the rest of it, right? Like that's just like, it's just sad, right? And also, good call. I literally have like peppermint gum right here. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Hopefully it helps. I think I'm gonna have to like start looking at things to like take care of my voice, because now that I've been doing this a bit more, especially with the Saturday episode with jar openers and Worrell. This happened on my last show too. Like at the last 30 minutes, I was struggling to like keep going. I'm like, dude, what's wrong with me? I appreciate it though very much. But this is what falls under the mega umbrella, right? This is, I think, what speaks to a lot of people who are really kind of disenfranchised with the fact that they're spreading the big tent so big. It makes a lot of, you don't even have to go to the full dissident right. We'll just keep it to the Christian right. You tie this in, you tie the abortion stuff in, and they feel uncomfortable voting for Trump because all of this still fits in underneath the MAGA camp. And so when you get things like the Amber Rose and the kind of the debacles you get at the RNC, which is, tokenism, it was like very degenerate to have a porn star be a keynote speaker. And then, you have more keynote time for like a person who's practicing Judaism than you really do Christians. It's just like none of it really kind of feels good. Rebrand the right. Yes. I think inevitably after Trump, because Trump has essentially captured the current GOP and the Republican Party, there will be, whether it's I doubt a third party by any means, but I think the Republican Party will be captured once again, whether it's during the Trump presidency by the Groyper crowd, or it'll be shortly afterwards, given the lead up to the election in 2028. I think that is bound to happen regardless. And I've been somebody who's been saying this for quite some time. I mean, one of the opening kind of instances that even speaks to this, if everybody remembers what happened during Calendargate, you had a huge break on the right where people were like, what is this, dude? And you have these big arguments between like the redheaded libertarian and CCG Bryson and a lot of other people like Sovereign Bras, again, another person who's now becoming a bigger figure. He's, a regular guy on the Whatever podcast. Andrew Wilson also had the same kind of come up off of the Whatever podcast. Christians who have their own kind of platforms that speak to this. And that's where it became really apparent that a lot of people in the MAGA movement are actually libertarians who have been disenfranchised, who want to uphold 2012 liberal values, but then wear the skin suit of republicanism. And I think that does the Republican Party a huge disservice. And at the macro, most people see that, and that's how you get the Susan Wiles saying, well, we can't win on conservative values. And maybe it's true. Maybe the majority of people are in this bend, and I would imagine they probably are in the bend of the libertarian right-leaning liberals. they think they're Republicans, but they're not. They're simply just, holding classical liberal values from 2012. And it's unfortunate because it does make the makeup of the party like too big, and it's all nothingness, which I think is why you generally see so much reactionary content come from the right rather than the left. And again, the left is always on the offensive, the right is always on the defensive, and I think these things are what needs to be changed. Again, that could be changed if the Trump campaign took a slightly less moderate approach and was a lot more forward and on the offense with things such as and we're going to also ensure that these mass deportations happen in this and this and this. And we're also going to ensure that there is a federal abortion ban, this and this and this. We're also going to, and doing the big ask kind of ideals. And that would put you in the offensive, because if you came forward within a federal abortion ban, which I think is one of those issues where it depending on the makeup of the constituency in each state, that is a win or lose issue, right? It's a very predominantly owned one by liberal white women. Not liberal white women, liberal women in general, single liberal women in general, who vote at a disparity rate of 68% leftward. And so in any kind of these smaller regions, that an issue such as that can be win or lose. It kind of forces you the pendulum one way or the other. So all in all, very unfortunate, but to speak to, it's not just immigration. It's not just the campaign managers. It's not just Israel. It's everything, right? There's so many aspects about what MAGA is, and not even just MAGA, the current iteration of the Republican Party, that is so far removed from conservative values. And thus, those who are on the Nick Fuentes' side, those who are on the Christian right side, I feel it's like a responsibility to then attack it from the right and be like, no, we can't do this. And then in turn, it disenfranchises a lot of people. All in all, though, I think as it sits currently, everyone can still sit here and go, we have to vote for Trump no matter what, because obviously the opposition is clearly a throwaway vote, and that will be voting for your own destruction. So it's a hard kind of thing to navigate to, and it makes it very easy for those who are in the position of the libertarians to say wow, you're ruining the campaign for us if you keep trying to push these radical values. And it makes sense from their perspective, but it also makes sense from the other perspective as well. Because if it's just in terms of winning, I can see and understand the arguments. But if it's in terms of we're trying to develop the best outcome, I understand the further right argument, and as well as mine. So I did want to say one of the portions I did want to speak to that was about the Secret Service regarding what occurred with the Trump-Elon space, because again, Trump and Elon Elon pressed it forward in the very, very opening portion of the space, but Trump still seemed to refuse to talk poorly in any fashion about what occurred to the Secret Service. Now, I do have a reaction of this specifically from Clint Russell. I'll go to the screen here. He says Trump's unwillingness to condemn the Secret Service on their failings has me convinced that he is either A, on some religious Zen trip after narrowly surviving death, or B, he thinks they were in on it, but doesn't want to say more until he's back in the White House. He says he's leading towards B. I also think that it could be B. I'm less inclined to believe that Donald Trump is going to just he went this whole 180 and is now this extremely religious Christian man. I know that he's spoken to it, that he believes more than what he used to, is what he said. But he still didn't really say it, I guess, if you understand what I'm saying. He said it, but he didn't really seem like he meant it in the way that an average Christian would think he was meaning it. And I lean towards B as well, purely because if you do think the Secret Service is in on it, and then you do begin to push and lean into this narrative of I think that it was done by the Secret Service, I think that somebody did try to mess me up, and then that puts them at risk, right? They're going to be we have to do it sooner. We have to do it right now. They might try it in a different format. Again, because if that's the protective detail he's allowed, maybe he's just going to wait until he can get into the White House to have more control over the situation, and then thus in turn retroactively go and look at it and investigate it and do the best of justice that he can. I will believe that more than I believe that he is on some kind of religious Zen trip. He says, novel concept, isn't it? Only weasels get into these positions. And you're 100% right. I even said this too. I think I say this to my wife pretty often. When you think about it, even when you're in high school and, you're growing up and, what does everybody want to be when you grow up? And then you know the kind of person who's like, I'm going to be in politics. And it's always like this really screechy, loud individual who has like the worst ideas. It tends to be just like the most left wing stuff. Well, that's who ends up who ends up in these positions, who end up taking this stuff over. And I think, again, that speaks to the fact that those who hold more conservative values have been sold this lie that, you can just be left alone in this country. And so it's a pressure cooker over a long enough period of time. You have all these left-wing people who are like crazy activists who are like, I will die for Palestine. I mean, you saw the American soldier literally lit himself on fire. These activists go to these huge extremes, tearing down the Liberty Bell, painting in the street, rainbow flags everywhere. Apologize to them if that hurt anybody's ears. And then the right wing is like that it's non-existent, it's not there. And that's because the majority of right wingers, as they age and grow older up into politics, they go, I was going to be left alone. And they abdicate literally all civic duty. But who are they abdicating that civic duty to? Well, they're abdicating it to Cindy Lou over there, who has been screaming about she's going to tape herself to the sidewalk because of oil or whatever. Stop big oil. And she lays in the street. That's what happens. There has never been a period, and the founding fathers never put forward this idea of okay, now once we make this constitution, everyone can go home and it'll be like this for the rest of our lives. No. Not only Ben Franklin, and I can't, Ben Franklin, and I think it was also Thomas Jefferson, both of them spoke to the fact that this can probably work for about 20 years, guys, and you might have to have another revolution, because they understood just the nature of how people will corrupt and they will try to abuse systems in their way. There will always be this existence of this kind of evil Overwatch burden that just wants to destroy, delineate, wants to, just break apart and bend things to its will. And saying, yep, men just wanted to have families and put their trust into the system, and now the knife is being twisted. 100%. And it's this lack of vigilance. It's just oh, they'll take care of it. And it's they're not taking care of it. They're doing the opposite. They're making sure they're finishing it off. Your First Amendment's literally in a chokehold right now. It's please help me. And we're I was going to be left alone, man. It's unfortunate because what this turns into is it just only turns into violence. Because if the only time that I just want to be left alone person will ever become involved is when it finally comes the day when an officer shows up to his door to take his gun, it's too late and you probably already turned your back on everyone else in your community. It's very individualistic, right? And I think it comes from this origin of liberalism. And liberalism in and of itself is entirely flawed. Even from its basis of inception, you as a person are an individual. It's no, you're not. When you're born to a mother. Now, the father might not be in that picture, but you are born to a family. You were born into civic responsibilities. You were born into something. You were born into a hierarchy. So this basic idea of liberalism as the individual entity, you owe nothing to your parents, it's wrong, right? You're born into some kind of natural ecosystem that has duties, responsibilities, inner workings, hierarchy, ebbs and flows. And so when you try to atomize that and you say, I just want to be left alone, and that form that it takes is, I'm not going to be involved in my community. The only time you're going to see me is at my house or at work. That's when it opens up all of these holes for all of these individuals to go and then fill the void. And thus you end up with Susan Wiles running these campaign teams. Because imagine, right? That's two never Trumpers are the only people that could run this campaign. I'll say it again. I could go, I'll run the campaign right now. I could go to my hometown, find two guys not politically affiliated, and they would run and at least hold more conservative values than the two who are currently at the top of the campaign ticket right now. So it's very, very nonsensical, to be quite honest. And I think it's unfortunate, and I think a lot of the ground will have to be made up during a Trump presidency, and I think that's where you're going to see a lot of real rivalries occur. You're going to see a lot of the right begin to break up once they are in office, because now we don't have to win anymore. We don't have to play nice with the cat turds. We don't have to play nice with all the conservatives who said, oh, we can't have Christian values because we can't win. It's okay, we did win. And now here's what we want to do. And if you're asking me, I think the camp that has the most momentum, the largest of the two camps, the one that has the most internet acuity, the one that has the most clout in social media, the one that has the most kind of ability to influence, I think will be the Groyper camp. And I think that Nick Fuentes has put himself in a position in which not only does he get people like Sneeko, who opposes him on theological grounds, who says that's a future president of the United States, I can sit here and tell you I can see that he's definitely captured a lot of the youth, a lot of kids aged from like 14 all the way up. They follow this man. I mean, I was watching his show live, and I watched as he said, "Go and like this tweet," and in 1 minute it had 6,000 likes, and that was the specific one that he responded to Trump with on there. If you're asking me, there might very well be a chance where we see the majority of these top MAGA thought leaders, who are these Christless conservatives who I speak about all the time, who do join the left, who do move over to the left, who maybe not even the left, they move to the RFK third party, they move to a libertarian party in a non-open borders, and then they'll actually probably acclimate to what's closer to what their actual value structure is, which is being a libertarian, a right-leaning libertarian, because that seems to be what most of the Trump campaign is, if not outright just simply liberal. And, even Scott Adams speaks to this too, where you have the Overton window, but both the parties are on the left-hand side of it. And so they view the center as like being the far right or the right wing. And anything beyond the center ground is far right. But that's a lot of ground to exist in over there. Which again, in turn, is why people like Tim Pool can say one odd thing about Trump and be like, well, I did like this one policy. And they go, see, he's far right. Because the Overton window has shifted so far over. And again, I imagine most people understand this. But what this is going to do is it's going to have very, very direct implications and we're operating with the fact if Trump does win the election, there will be some very, very harsh kind of infighting that occurs. And I think the right's going to begin to form its own new image. I can only hope to that. If Trump doesn't win, that's going to come way faster. You're going to have all these people who are on the right wing who will feel vindicated after he lost, not feel good about the loss, but be vindicated in the fact that he didn't do things radical enough, he didn't push the needle far enough, and thus all of that top-end management who then lost in a Trump campaign will now be seen as like, see, we shouldn't have never done big tent conservatism. This is why we lost. And I think no matter what, but whether a victory or a loss, there is a bunch of gunpowder primed to go off inside the right wing to shape it into a new, different form. I can only hope, because I imagine same with the viewers, is very tired of getting a very, very lackluster kind of campaign. One that's like, and it dies. Like one that's like, and it's just like, it's so close. It's like, it's right there, but it's like, could you just take the next step and say what you want to say and stop trying to pander and appeal to the New York Times? And I think that's going to do it for me today. I didn't realize I went that far over the 2-hour mark. I'll probably save some of this stuff to cover for tomorrow in regards to the UK. Well, not tomorrow, but the next chance I get to stream in regards to the UK. Matter of fact, let me end on this because I think this is actually a funny thing and I want to cover it so I don't forget so you guys can see it too. This was with the UK and Keir Starmer, I think is his name, the Prime Minister, the one who issued that threat with a bunch of vitriol on it as well, where he's like, "You're the far-right thuggery." Yeah, I can't really say it as good as he did. He was kicked out of a pub, but I'll start with this one first. I'll put this on screen. This is the first one. I'm going to go a little bit longer just because Titan's here. So this is a funny video. It's just a guy laughing. But the quote on this is, when the government accidentally admits that if they told the truth, you'd be justified in being angry. Now, if you read down here, what is he saying that to? Well, Politics UK tweeted that Keir Starmer doesn't want to talk about the causes of the riots to avoid them looking justified. If that's not the biggest outright admission that there is legitimate reasons for these people to actually be rioting, I just like, it's insane how bad the optics are on UK Keir Starmer. Like, there's no way that you can recover from how bad all of this looks. And there's another instance of this video I'll show you too. I'm told the reason for this message discipline is a concern that discussing causes might be interpreted as suggesting some of the unrest was justified. Quite insane, right? In fact, the opposite is true. In fact, if these causes are so unjustified and so undignified, so easily disprovable, then it should be easily be able to be transparent. You should easily be able to put it up here and see like, and this is why this cause is wrong. This is why this cause is wrong. But he's not doing that. He's saying, actually, if we put it in the public, people might see that it's all justified. And again, you go back to the quote, right, which is this guy laughing, which is when the government accidentally admits that if they told the truth, you'd be justified in being angry. just wild, right? Wild. And it's insane too, because some of the comments that I ended up getting on a video, the clip of one of my last streams talking about the UK stuff, they were, Swiggleby got mad, but one literally said to keep my nose in my own business. And so if that doesn't show you the level of tensions, it's pretty wild. Joining Music says, great content as always. Thank you. No, thank you. I appreciate it very much. I do this for you guys, right? I try my best to be as professional and as well read as I possibly can be. I appreciate you guys. If I had 0 viewers for, episode number 50, I'd probably be like, it's probably time to hang it up, man. Like, time to go home and rethink my life. It's like the Star Wars episode. Go home and rethink your life. That'd be me. But I will go here. I will end on this. This is him getting kicked out of a pub. So it's Keir Starmer, and this is from Barry Stanton. Again, this is one of the accounts that definitely fits into the neo-Nazi mold. So I definitely don't sign on to most of everything what he says. But this is Keir Starmer getting kicked out by the owner. Literally, the owner's fighting through his security detail to get to Keir Starmer to force him out.
That man is not allowed in my pub. No, Lord. I'm not going to physically hurt him. That man... Oi! That's assault. I am not bothering you. I am not bothering him. That man is not allowed in my pub. Get out of my pub. Go on. Get out of my pub. Thank you.
Just gotta say, the fact that they're still using face masks is just absurd, and it just looks so dumb that you walk in, the owner's not wearing one. You walk in for 2 minutes, walk out, comes right back off. Like, yeah, dude, this is the ultimate protection measure. It's so ridiculous, dude. Yes. Also, well said. Praying for my UK brothers. Yes. If you guys have been following along with that. Dude, some of these cases are insane. I have one that I couldn't even show on air because it was so graphic. Apparently one of the guys who was actually recently jailed for simply posting something online, I believe, was slashed like crazy. I think the best way I can say it. In the video, I saw blood all over everywhere. It was in a prisoner cell. So it's hard to know like how well they're being treated, if at all. And one thing I even pointed to was like the treatment seems to be even more aggressive than what we saw with J6, and they're a lot more confident in doing so. Obviously, because there's less rights that they have to go and circumvent to ensure they can abuse and torture these people in whatever agenda they see fit. But very well said. We should be praying for our brothers. And you're saying, my homeland is England. It is very sad to see the fall of the British Empire. Yeah. And this is why I cover it very extensively, is because all of these parallels are lining up with what we can see in the near future of the United States. And so that's why it sucks, but they are at least an example to other places, like, don't follow these mistakes. And, I'm hoping it's not the end as we know it for Great Britain and the UK or the EU as its whole, but the way that these immigration policies have kind of already destroyed them, and they're probably much less capability to do mass deportations without outright causing a civil war, puts them in a really, really, really bad decision. So I will end on that. Thank you for everybody for being here. I appreciate it greatly for all of you guys. And I know probably everybody here may not have been here at the beginning. What I will say is I had my monetization like very temporarily revoked. It wasn't for anything like nefarious on YouTube's end. Something about my identity check didn't go through. So I have to wait for Google to actually send me a PIN number through the mail. So once I get that back, so Super Chats, Super Thanks works, but I have no access to gift like channel memberships. Once that does come back though, I will give out or gift out free memberships. I think I have 10 that I can give out for free now that I'm in the partner program. So once that happens, I will be giving them out too. Definitely, I already have a list. I have a list of people who I know come in here all the time. Titan, you're definitely at the top of that list. I will be giving these out as soon as I can. I said on my last show I'll be giving them out next show. Just wasn't able to do it because I just got my identity revoked for whatever reason. But once again, thanks everybody for being here. Yes, 07. 07. I love that, man. Christ is King. Everybody have a good rest of your day. Stay blessed, stay vigilant, and be the role models that you want the people to lead you to be. Take care and have a good night. Peace out, everybody.